Now, as we speak,
Yep. Yep. We're live.
okay, I need to fix something on the light. I'm back in 1 second.
The radical fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody. Welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this it's Monday. It's a little, not a conventional time. We're 12 o'clock East Coast time. I know some of you are just waking up on the West Coast. Those of you who wake up at 9 a.m. I don't know who you are, but or showing up at work right now. But Nikos, who is joining us, is in Greece. He's in Athens, so which is on a completely different time zone, and to accommodate his schedule. If I was going to do this on a regular time, it would have been what, 2 a.m. or
2
3
a.m. Yes, I
a.m.
would still do it. I would still do it, but it's better that we're doing it now.
It's better that we're doing it now, absolutely. So thank you. Thanks for joining me, Nikos. I'm looking forward to this. So Nikos' family name I cannot pronounce.
No
And
one can.
therefore, he is like the Pele of objectivism. Not only is he good at what he does, but he only gets one name, right? He's he's known as Nikos, and I think he's the only Nikos in objectivism so far. There might be others. We'll see.
Well, if I were the Pele of objectivism, I would be the second greatest of all time, and that place is taken. So maybe the
Yeah.
Xavi.
Okay, maybe we'll have to pick another Brazilian player that goes by only one name, because outside of Brazil, I think they almost always go by two.
Spain goes by one. Xavi is Spanish.
Really, the Spanish players go by one.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I didn't know that. Okay, well, we as I think everybody knows, Nikos is a fellow at the Ayn Rand Institute, and is speaks all over the world. I was just with him on a tour where we spoke in Australia, at a conference in Australia, and he speaks all over Europe. And yeah, we usually bump into each other somewhere in the world, typically not the United States. Okay.
True.
All right, so we're going to talk about a few topics today, but we're going to start out with the topic of the horrific event that happened in December of last year. So just what, 2 months ago,
Yeah.
in New York, where Luigi Mangione, a 24-year-old, really nobody, went up in early morning and basically point blank shot the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson. I thought it looked like a professional hit because, I mean, he was so calm about it. He was so methodological about it. It looked like a pro had done this, and he was caught a few days later. And maybe say a little bit about what this was, and then we can talk about the cultural reaction, which I think is more interesting than this one specific horrible event.
Yeah, it's not so much about the event. It's about how unique that event was culturally. And why do I say unique? We've seen many bad things happening. My generation has seen many bad things. 9/11, the financial crisis, October 7th. But every time something bad happens, there is a critical mass of good people who stand up and side by the side of the good. So when we defend the good against the bad, usually we have people in our foxhole, people with us on the barricades. This time, though, we look by our sides and there's no one there. When this CEO, the CEO of United Healthcare, the CEO of these big health insurance companies was assassinated, and this for me was clearly a terrorist act because It was an assassination that wanted to pass a political message. And also, as we will see, it was used as a terrorist act by people who wanted to pursue political change. So when he was assassinated, you look towards the left and you see the moral degenerates who celebrate the assassination. But then you look on the other side, and the best you can expect for are people who have this timid reaction which says that, well, violence is never the answer. Killing someone is bad. Or you hear people saying, this guy was a father, he had 2 children.
Yeah.
And usually this is the reaction that you see when a criminal is killed. Well, people say, come on, killing, no one should be murdered. Or we have a phrase in Greece, these guys have mothers as well who will cry for them. And that was the strongest reaction you could find. But there was no one who stood up to say, you know what? The victim was not just a father. The victim was actually a good guy. A guy who his role, the role of a CEO, was someone who was doing good, was someone who was doing something productive, something that should be cheered. No one said that. No one from the right, no libertarian said that. And it's particularly interesting, Yaron, to compare that cultural moment that we saw with the murder of the CEO with another murder that we saw in 2020, the murder of George Floyd. There you have the victim being someone who had the criminal past, 8 times had spent 8 times in jail.
Yep.
And the perpetrator was someone who was guilty, sure, but he had no intention to commit this crime. He didn't wake up that morning saying, today I'm gonna kill. Of course, the killing was horrible, and this goes without saying. And yet, in that case, we see the victim being celebrated, being lionized, the victim being seen as this avatar of this whole group. And the whole society stood up, every single institution stood up and said, Black Lives Matter. Universities, basketball teams. I remember in the playoffs that year, Black Lives Matter became actually the sponsor of NBA.
Yep.
And this time, not a single institution stood up to say, CEO lives matter. And what an injustice, right? On the one side, you have someone who, of course, shouldn't be killed. Of course, it was a horrible police misconduct. But it wasn't a person who, I mean, you go to universities and there are portraits of George Floyd as a saint. Why? Because of his identity as a member from a group which has been historically marginalized.
Well, it's
But
more than
here-
that. It's the very fact, I think, that he was, to some extent, he was a lowlife. He was a person who achieved nothing, who was on drugs, who had a criminal background, who, and this is altruism, right? This is you see somebody like that, and well, he becomes the good guy. And this is a great example, right? Versus somebody successful, relatively wealthy. No, they must be the exploiter, the bad guy. I mean, this is straight out of the leftist playbook, right?
And this is straight out of the leftist playbooks, and it's adopted by everyone.
Yes.
So for me, that was the saddest thing. That was the saddest thing. When the George Floyd, there was no one who said, I stand with the police officer. And no one should stand by him except from the proper legal defense that he should have, right? He did something that was horrible.
Yep.
But in this case, where you have this person who woke up this morning and said, I'm going to assassinate this person because he's a member of a group I hate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, Yaron, did you read the manifesto of the murderer? He says in the manifesto, I'm not even sure what's wrong with health insurance, but there are all these people in the past who have said that they're bad guys. Like, this guy didn't even have a personal opinion why he did what he did.
No, he actually had a positive experience with health insurance. He'd had back surgery, and he had positive experience with health insurance. So it's not some aggrieved individual who got denied and was forced into bankruptcy as a consequence and was really pissed off. This is purely, in a sense, intellectual. This is purely theoretical. This was not some emotional lashing out at all.
Yeah, and the creepiest thing for me is that this guy wasn't even a radical leftist, as far as we can tell. This guy was shopping around for political ideas. But this notion that the rich, the 1%, the most successful, are by default guilty is so mainstream that you don't even have to be a Maoist or a fringe radical leftist to buy into this. So the murder of the CEO was a unique watershed moment for me. Was a moment that gives you clarity about where the culture is. And that's why we remembered in the Ayn Rand Institute that essay that Ayn Rand wrote, The Persecuted Big Business, the Persecuted Minority, right?
Yep.
And she wrote this in 61, I think, and how true it was. And we see it now. We see it these days. And in the book you wrote some years ago, Yaron, you mentioned a statistic. What is the percentage of crimes committed in popular culture committed by the rich, by the 1%, by big businessmen? There's no other group which is portrayed in such dark colors. And this is an injustice. People should stand up and say, this is unjust. How do you call it when you stereotype against one group in a bad way, in a way which is discriminatory, in a way which is unjust? People should be very angry with this. And which one is this group? It's not any group. It's the group of the greatest benefactors of humanity. The group of the people who have created everything that we see around and makes our life what it is today. You have the phone. I don't want to steal this move, but the phone, the computer, the medical care that you get. Where do people think the medicine comes from? Where do they think the stuff that saves our lives come from?
Evil big pharma.
Evil big pharma. And again, no one gets it. No one gets it, Yaron. The conservatives don't get it. Even libertarians don't get it. I did a little research today, trying to see what have the big libertarian organizations said. Most of them said nothing. And if they said something, there was this economic analysis which said, yeah, well, there is a problem with health provision because health services is a scarce resource, and how it's allocated, there are various ways you can do it. As if health services, the doctors, the science behind it, the experiments, the vaccines, the antibiotics, as if they grow on trees. And what we need is just a good way to allocate it, who gets what. No one gets that. The medicines that save people's life, someone struggles very, very hard to come up with them. Someone struggles very hard to produce them. They jump through all these hoops to get through the regulations. It takes years and years. It takes billions. And instead of saying, you know what, good job, thank God for these people, because otherwise we wouldn't have the science that keeps us alive, hopefully for long, we consider this group, we see them with more disdain than we see mafia guys. Even if a mafia guy was executed, there would be some sympathy. They would say, oh, at least he was, they would find some redeeming factors. Here, the only redeeming factor was, oh, this guy was a father.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how the left responded, because they made a really big deal out of this, and maybe dig a little bit to the causes of that. What is it about leftist ideology that drives them to do stuff like this and then respond the way that they did?
Yeah. First of all, when we speak about leftists, again, we don't speak about some fringe, very extremist movements. If you see the way members of Congress or of the Senate reacted to the assassination, think about AOC, think about Elizabeth Warren, they amplified that they verified in a way that this was a terrorist act, because they said this gives a message that healthcare is at a 0 point, that something needs to be done. As if saying, take notice, because this is what happens when the reform that should happen does not happen. Of course, they say would condemn violence, but. So for them, the proper way to deal with healthcare is that healthcare is a right. Now, what does a right mean? It means that everyone should have a claim on it for free. In the same way that I have a right to take a walk and breathe air, people have a right for healthcare. Now, see how this sanctions violence against healthcare CEOs. If you have a right to healthcare, a health insurance company comes between you and your right. They prevent you from what is legitimately yours. In which case, it's like you're in a defense. You're in self-defense when you use violence against a healthcare private provider. And actually, we saw this framing quite often in popular culture, saying that this is one form of violence, assassinating a CEO is one form of violence, but another form of violence is health insurance companies denying claims. This is the result of the leftist narrative that says that healthcare is a right, as if, again, healthcare grows on trees and all you have to do is go and pick it up, completely hiding the fact that someone needs to come up with the medicines, someone needs to come up with the procedures. This costs tremendous amounts of money. This costs tremendous amounts of effort. And just to claim that healthcare is a right is to claim that every scientist, every doctor, every healthcare provider should be my servant. Yep. That these people live for me and they have a duty to give me what I want in whatever terms I want, whenever I want, and for free. That's the argument that the left has created. And again, unfortunately, it has worked. It has worked. It has infested the minds of almost everyone out there in the culture.
And they generalized from this. That is, it didn't stay just an issue of healthcare because there were wanted posters, right? I mean, dead or alive, for a variety of different CEOs. So it wasn't just healthcare. This was also about being a CEO.
Yeah. And part of it is perhaps they have zero idea what a CEO does. The leftists being infected by the Marxist labor theory of value, yep, conspiracy theory. Actually, not even conspiracy theory. This is flat earth economics, right? That all the value is created, yep, by manual labor. So these people see the CEO sitting in an office and they think this guy is not creating something. Therefore, he must be a parasite.
Exploiter.
Now, an exploiter, right? Now, this is so unbelievable wrong that actually even calling it wrong is doing it injustice. I will give an example for sports because hopefully some of these people at least can understand this with a sports example. Imagine seeing a coach, a manager, sitting at the bench, not actually playing soccer, as you people call it, or basketball, and thinking, oh, this guy is not doing anything. This guy is not in any way participating in the action. Therefore, this guy is a parasite. Not thinking that this is the guy who comes up with a strategy. This is a guy who stays up 20 hours every day thinking about 20 different people. In which position is every person going to play? Thinking about the future. Who are the people who I'll have to trade in the next trade deadline? It's like thinking, oh, I see 5 people playing at the court. They're the only ones producing value. The guys at the bench, they're parasites. Except that the CEO has a job which is way more difficult even than the job of the manager, of the basketball coach, because the CEO has to also think about the future. He has to think about every other company in the field. What are they doing? What are the technologies that might affect this today, in 5 years, or in 10 years? So if people think that it's so easy being a CEO, I would tell them, go become a CEO yourself. Go become a CEO if it's so simple. Or if you don't need a CEO, create your own company and don't hire a CEO. And let's see how you fare.
Yep. There have been attempts at that. They do not fare very well. I mean, CEOs, they have to manage huge quantities of labor. They have to manage capital. They have to organize the company. They have to, I mean, they of course have to plan for the future, but even in the present, the amount of complexity that they have to deal with is 1,000 times greater than even the best basketball coach has to deal with.
Yeah.
Just think, basketball is 5 people. Some CEOs manage 100,000 people.
Yeah. But again, notice how even among CEOs themselves, they will not stand up to say, wait a minute, someone please recognize us. Actually, they do often the opposite. The example that comes to mind is this horrendous commercial or campaign that Apple had a couple of years ago, where Tim Cook, one of the most productive people on earth,
Yep.
is apologizing to Mother Gaia, to Mother Earth, if you remember that monument of cringe, apologizing for Apple creating all that wealth and actually saying, please, please trust us. We will actually give a penance for our crimes, and this is how much we recycled. So even CEOs themselves view themselves as by default guilty. They view themselves as doing something which is at best morally neutral, at worst morally bad, and then they have to do things to apologize. They have to beg, please let us continue. Continue to do what? Continue to making the world a better place. Continue giving us all these miracles that make our life what it is today, that make the time that we live a historical exception. The fact that we live in the 0.1% of human history, where the thing that we are doing here and the things that billions of other people are doing, we owe it to these great minds that are so much productive than the rest of us who enjoy the gifts in a way. I don't want to call them gifts, but you get what I mean. Who enjoy the product of their mind and the product of their work. And instead of saying thank you, we view them as parasites and as our servants. And that's unjust. Like, if you're a good person, you should not feel good having this attitude.
Yeah, and they don't feel that that pride in their own achievements, as you said. So where does that come from? I mean, certainly some of it comes from Marx and exploitation theory and stuff, but it can't all come from that. I mean, ultimately, I don't think most people even know what Marx says. So where does that come from, do you think?
Well, it comes from this horrendous idea that doing stuff first and foremost to enrich yourself or to make money or to produce something for the sake of profit, that this is something bad. So Apple, they don't see themselves as, wait a minute, we've changed history.
Yep.
We've empowered so many people to chase their dreams, their artistic dreams, their creative dreams. They don't see themselves like that. They see themselves, we are the richest or second richest company on earth. And this imposes a huge burden, a huge moral burden, that not only we are morally suspicious, we are the second most morally suspicious entity on earth. Because how do you make money? By exploitation. But even if you don't make money by exploitation, the fact that you made money now is suspicious, because now you have to start giving them away.
Yep.
You can't keep them for yourself. So now they're in this existential stress. How are we going to give as much of that away, or at least the better of them, hopefully, pretend that we want to give them away? Although I'm afraid they don't just pretend. They truly believe that the fact that they're so rich should lead to some introspection in terms of what they did wrong.
So the left generalized from Brian Thompson's killing and basically called for the killing of other CEOs, primarily financiers, I think, because financiers are always at the forefront of this. So you mentioned libertarians, but was there anybody out there defending CEOs, defending health insurance? You know, was there anybody defending, in a sense, capitalism at all?
I found a couple of articles, literally a couple of articles of all this outpour I found a couple of articles that said that, you know what, people, this is not cool. This is a moral depravity.
Yep.
But with the exception of people in our little objectivist universe,
Yep.
I didn't see people standing up and saying, you know what, CEOs do something good, or even more, health insurance or private healthcare CEOs are doing something good, because no one wants to go there.
Yep.
Because this is the lowest of the low in the circles of hell when it comes to the worldview of most people. Not only you do things for profit, but you use the field of healthcare for profit, which means some people need something, and instead of you giving it to them for free on a silver plate, you request a reward for this. You want to make it a quid pro quo. So in the mind of most people, this is something which is monstrous to even think about it. So even defenders of capitalism will say, look, I believe that in a free market, but some things cannot be a commodity. Healthcare cannot be a commodity because healthcare is a need. So here's the magic word, need. So because you have a need, it means that somehow, the rest of the world needs to come together to provide it to you. Not asking the question, how are they going to come up with the solution about my problems? How is it that for the first time in history we have such a progress in medicine? No one asks these questions. They just expect, give me the result, give me the treatment I need. How you come up with it, how you ration me among other...
or even how you pay for it.
Or how you pay for it, how you pay for it.
Yeah,
Maybe it costs you billions to come up with a new medicine. Maybe you have to go through a Herculean struggle through regulator after regulator and regulation after regulation, but I need it, therefore give it to me. So don't only look, as you said, it's not just Marx and his ideas that have created this culture. It's also this widespread notion that your need is an automatic claim to the rest of humanity, no questions asked.
So,
Of course,
yeah, good.
now just one more thing. What happens in countries where they follow through in this moral imperative that says, yeah, you have a right to healthcare? How much is the median waiting period, for example, in Canada, between you seeing your practitioner, your, let's say, first point of contact, and you going through the treatment that you need? It can be 7 months. It can be quite, the number of weeks was something like 27. I had to double check it because I couldn't believe it. I said, that cannot be true. And I checked it again and again, and the more reports provided the same number. Now, imagine if you have something which is time sensitive. You go to the system and the system tells you, sorry, brother, there are many more who have the same claim on you. So, yes, your life might be at risk, but why is your life of more concern to me than the life of all these people? And you know what, Yaron? Luckily, you don't have that experience. But when you go to a public doctor, you almost feel that the doctor does you a favor by accepting you because you have nothing to give them. You have, of course, there's all this corruption, at least in the Greek system, you give money under the table, but you feel that you are indebted because what do I have to give back? And this is something which creates not solidarity and goodwill. It creates the opposite. It creates this very weird dynamic that the doctor has the attitude, the mere fact that I'm seeing you, you should feel privileged. So this is the system and the model that they have in mind. It's a system which is like, if human life is the thing that you're after, this is a system that makes sure that it goes against your dignity, and also it goes against the getting the service, the attention, the medical attention that you need. We've seen it in Canada, we've seen it in the UK, we've seen it anywhere where this universal healthcare system is the norm.
So what about the people who claim, they tell us all the time, that they hate the left, they hate socialism, They don't want socialized medicine. They hate Obamacare. Call them right, call them Republicans, call them MAGA, new right. I mean, was there anybody there that stood up for health insurance or for CEOs more broadly?
Well, the interesting thing with this crowd is that although they will say they're in favor of capitalism, they will quickly start putting some conditions. They will say, for example, that big business is in bed with big government. Therefore, big business is morally suspicious. For conservatives, the big business which is morally suspicious is business whose leaders are quote unquote woke. For libertarians, the business which is suspicious is any business which is in a heavily regulated area.
Yep.
Therefore, they see the healthcare industry, perhaps the most regulated business in the world, in the free world, and they will say the big business here is suspicious because they are in bed with government. They don't even have is it clarity? I mean, I think a 5-year-old could figure it out. A guy with guns puts rules. You have to obey to the rules of the guy with a gun. Who has more power here? For libertarians, it's something like 50-50. Who can really tell? And again, this should be libertarians should be running a slam dunk campaign, saying this is the impact, the poisonous impact of the left in our culture. Conservatives should actually do the same thing. Instead, it was mostly silence. Silence, or the most edgy kids on Twitter of the new right. They even reproduce some of the memes with Luigi Mangione. They took it as more like a joke, more like another chance for laughs and for lols on the internet.
So really, left and right, I mean, there really is nobody defending capitalism or certainly defending CEOs, the people actually engaged in the business of business. There's nobody out there defending them.
There's nobody out there defending them, and there's nobody out there who bothers to explain to people what these people are doing,
Yep.
why these people are the biggest benefactors of humanity. And
Yep.
if you think about it, how many good people are out there who appreciate science, right? And that's something good. Everyone should appreciate science. How is science translated to improving our life, my life and your life? The scientist is somewhere there in the lab. But there is someone who is the intermediate between the scientist and the material improvements of our life. And this is the businessman, the businesswoman, the entrepreneur, the industrialist. They take science from the lab and they translate it to the things that we have here and the things that make our life better. That's why when I use the term benefactor, they're actually benefactors. The fact that out there it's 2 degrees cold Celsius and inside here I have a controlled environment, I owe it to some people who put their mind into work and created this thing which we call heating. Now, everyone takes it for granted, but these things come from some people who have these ideas and they're productive and they work hard and they make it happen. And these people get rich, but we get so much more. We get this comfortable life, this life that becomes longer and longer, and we owe it to people like them. So at least, let's let them be. And when someone literally stands up and say that they deserve to die, at least let's defend them and say, no, these people are good. Or at least just let's say, you know what, sometimes thank you. You did something great. You did something good. Thank you for making my life better. Thank you for coming up with a drug that might save my life one day.
Mm-hmm. So it gets as cold as 2 degrees Celsius in Athens?
Not very often, but it does.
All right. Too cold for me. All right. So you've done a lot of reading and research over the years obviously on the left, and you've written about that, and you've taught classes on Marxism, and and
Critical
woke.
race theory.
What's that? Critical race theory. Yes, critical race theory stands behind much of what the woke were trying to advocate. Okay, here's one. Can you connect critical race theory to the murder of the CEO?
Well, critical race theory views the world through the prism of different groups in relations of power. There is no bigger relation of power than I need something for my health and someone has it and doesn't give it to me. But again, this implies that group which has the means to save my life, they owe me something, or that these people are my servants.
Yep.
So critical race theory is being loosely related to this prism of Marx with groups who have the power and groups who haven't. Yes, in some way reflects also on how people view the CEO.
Yep. So you've also done a lot of research on the new right, and the new right seems to have some influence on MAGA or is part of MAGA, and of course MAGA has an enormous amount of influence on Trump. Trump has influence on them. It's kind of goes both ways. What is your assessment of kind of the state of the new right now in terms of their ideas, to the extent that you can call them ideas? But what does the right stand for today? What animates them? What drives them? And to what extent are they influential within the broader right in American politics?
When we started talking about the new right, Yaron, some years ago, they were a subgroup within the conservative movement. They were a minority.
Well,
These days,
so it used to be, what did we call them in the old days? Alt-right? Do you remember the alt-right? So
yeah, alt-right was a very specific.
In 2016, how does the alt-right and new right, are they different?
Well, yeah, alt-right technically was a group that had a very specific racial outlook, but people called it alt-right. I used to call it the countercultural right.
Okay.
The right that fought the culture wars. Now, this started as a fringe movement.
Yep.
There was the conservative movement. On the side of the conservative was the MAGA crowd, and attached, let's say, to the right of the MAGA crowd was this new right. Today, this right is the institutional force in American conservatism, and not only American conservatism. Now, the most important question is the one you ask: what animates them? Are they animated by an ideology? And the answer is mostly not. They're animated first and foremost by a negative. And the negative is, there is this group, there is this tribe, the left, everything bad has to do with them, and we need to stand opposed to them. Whatever they stand for, we will stand against. For example, they were in favor of Ukraine. We will be skeptical to Ukraine. At best skeptical, the worst of them openly simping for Putin. They were in favor of the vaccines. We will be vaccine skeptics. Not lockdown skeptics. We were lockdown skeptics before it was cool. Actually, not skeptics. We were on the barricades against the lockdowns before it was cool. They became involved when it became part of the culture wars. So what animates them is first and foremost this tribalistic, contrarian outlook. Whatever the left is for, we will be against. Now, here's where it gets particularly dangerous. With the left, they conflate also liberalism. Not liberalism only in the American sense, where by liberalism you call Obama.
Yep.
Liberalism also in terms of you have a rule of law, you have separation of powers, you have what we would consider a society of rule of law. Now they see this also as part of problem. For example, they said it's too much freedom and it's too much concern with one's own business and one's own life that led to things like the transgender ideology, the woke ideology, the CRT. So not only they throw the baby with the bad water, whatever the phrase is, now they consider also the baby as problematic. They see freedom as the problem. And this is particularly explicit in the very short, in the smaller part of this movement, which is intellectual indeed. And this is mostly the national conservatives or the Christian nationals. These are people who indeed are ideological. So what is the new right doing? They are portraying freedom as a problem. Now, luckily, this has not yet become the number one dominant characteristic. So, for example, with the MAGA crowd, you still have this instinctive, let's say, slogan level of defense of freedom. You see it with Dodge, we need to limit the government. Here it's also very important, the example of Milei in Argentina, which, even if it's at the level of the meme, it's a meme that says, too much government is bad, more economic freedom is good. So you have this counterbalance.
Notice how they're justifying too much government, right? So the first thing Dodge goes after is U.S. aid, and the things that they highlight as look how corrupt this is are all the leftist stuff, right? So even the cutting of government is justified by not by we need to shrink government to its proper use or the Constitution. They never mention the or anything like that. It's no, the leftists hijacked the government to promote all its goals. We must get the leftist stuff out of government.
Yes, which again, it's so satisfactory to see this cesspool of all these NGOs, all these things. It's good to see them exposed.
Yep.
However, the number one problem is not that the state takes my money and gives it to leftists. It's that the state takes my money, full stop. And unfortunately, they don't reach that. They don't reach that level. Although, do you agree though that this is a bit of an open field, that there are more and more people now who can be persuaded that yes, government coercively taking your stuff is bad? Do you see a moment of where the field is open and maybe the pendulum can go more towards more economic freedom?
I don't, not in the sense of taking your money. I think there is some understanding that we should limit what the government spends your money on. And we should constrain it, and but they're going after the low-hanging fruit. So first you say, well, we shouldn't spend it on foreigners, like we shouldn't spend it on subsidizing Nikos in Athens, right? That's far away. Subsidizing Yaron in America, that's okay, but subsidizing Nikos no good, because he's a foreigner. And then we shouldn't spend it. Welfare is okay, but we shouldn't spend it on illegal immigrants because they're the other, right? And this goes with the nationalism, right? All forms of nationalism. We shouldn't spend it on corruption. So they're going to go, they're doing the Defense Department now, so they're going to go after corruption in the Defense Department. Because everybody can agree on that. But nobody's saying, should we have a welfare state? Nobody's saying, should we regulate banks? They're saying, maybe we should regulate them a little less. But should we regulate them? That question, I don't see raising, or should the government do any social spending like welfare? Should we get rid of the welfare state? Nobody's open to that. There's some, we want to replace the income tax with tariffs. Why? Because they did that in the 19th century and it seems cool. Is it mathematically possible? Yeah, don't confuse me with math. Math is complicated. I mean, that's the level you're seeing stuff. So I don't see a opening on the side of, no, taxes are immoral in some sense. Taxes are immoral. And look, I don't like to emphasize taxes because the problem is not the taxes. Yes, it's wrong for them to take my money. The problem is the spending. Once they have the moral right to spend and to invest and to provide welfare, they have to get the money from somewhere. So it's the spending that is the real, I think, crux of the issue.
And let no one have any doubt that whether the conservatives and whether the MAGA people will go against the sacred cows of Medicare and Medicaid. It was clear in their program that Medicare and Medicaid are not to be touched.
Yep.
So you have a pile of where you spend. the biggest block of that pile officially in their program, they're telling you we're not going to touch this. So yes, it's great that you're not going to throw money to terrorist sanctioning cesspool, horrible NGOs. All this is good. But if you think this is going to have any significant impact on the US debt or the deficit, all that stuff, it's not going to have any significant impact.
No, and even reducing the NGO stuff, I think at the end of the day, they'll still pay the NGOs. They'll just do it differently and they'll call it something different. And the NGOs might be different. They might be right-wing NGOs, not left-wing NGOs. But the government's not going to stop providing so-called aid. Even on the right, people are upset about getting rid of it completely. They just want to support their thing, not the other guys. So you're saying there are some intellectuals on the right, not a lot, but there's some intellectuals on the right, and intellectuals on the right are these Christian nationalists or conservative nationalists. Other than, is there a positive agenda? That is, the negative agenda is we hate everything the left does. At some point, they have to come up with a positive, and they're trying. At least the intellectuals are trying. What is the positive? What is the next level animating factor?
Yeah, the only positive alternative I've heard from the right is the dismantling of the bureaucratic state. But there's an interesting caveat in that. So who is the only intellectual on the right who speaks with a plan about such a dismantling? It's Curtis Yarvin, who is becoming so known to the wider circles that recently he was interviewed, I think, by the New York Times.
Yeah.
So Yarvin has he believes that in the same way that in East Germany, it would make no sense to say, I'm going to reform Stasi or I'm going to reform the communist youth. What made sense is that once the wall fell, you would go to Stasi and to say, you know what? Go home. A bloodless revolution. Go home, receive your pensions. This institution ceases to exist. In the same way, he says, you cannot reform the real pillars of power in the United States. And he claims the real pillars of power is not the government, but they are the 15 bureaucracies around the government, starting from the universities to the diplomatic corps, the think tanks of foreign policy and all that stuff. So his plan is that you need to go to this institution and tell them you're done. You literally close them. Imagine closing Harvard. Imagine closing Harvard, demolishing it and creating a park. Now, this could be an interesting thought experiment, at least when it has to do with with bureaucratic, useless institutions. Here's the interesting thing, though, the caveat. Who is going to do this? A very powerful executive. An executive with powers that have been unseen for the biggest part of American history, with a few exceptions, he says. There's the exception of Lincoln, the exceptions of FDR, the exception of Lyndon Johnson. People who take for themselves the power of something like a Caesar. This is how these circles call it, the powers of a Caesar. So you have an executive which realizes that I can have more powers than what most people think I can, and I can actually use these powers, and by using these executive powers, I'm going to create these reforms. Because, he says, there is no other way to reform these institutions. You can only bulldoze them. You can only destroy them. And a strong executive can do this. Of course, then the question is, what if, okay, let's say our guy is going to do that. He's going to turn Harvard to a parking lot and close all the NGOs and all that stuff. What if the next president is, let's say, Elizabeth Warren, and then uses the same executive power? I mean, then what? Or what if your Caesar is someone who wants to use this power in order to take more freedom away from you? What do you do then? How is this a good plan? So,
to what extent does Curtis Yarvin care about freedom? The freedom of the individual.
Well, the difficult thing with Karl Yaron is he's a bit like Zizek. It's very difficult to press him. Okay, tell me what you think about this one, this one topic. Let's put it this way: year after year, he seems to care less and less about individual freedom. And you see this more and more on the right, right? The goal is to dismantle the state of the left, so to speak. But then the question is, towards what end? What are we trying to achieve here? And this is more and more lost. At best, more and more it is lost. At worst, you have again a direct attack on freedom, that the freedom of the individual to begin with is something bad. To begin with is something you shouldn't aspire to. Because if you aspire to more freedom of the individual, you end up with transgenderism, transhumanism. By the way, for some reason, national conservatives, they use transhumanism and transgenderism as, I don't know, whatever they hear the term trans, it triggers them. It leads to this type of phenomena. Therefore, freedom for the individual has been tried and failed.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that Curtis Yarvin is incredibly influential, particularly in Silicon Valley. That is, he's been brought into the circles of kind of right-wing Silicon Valley. Mark Andreessen supposedly has been very heavily influenced by Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. These are all people who have supposedly been in his circle, and he's invited to, the best dinners, and also influential in the Claremont Institute. Claremont Institute is a conservative institute. Used to be very pro-constitution. Now they're post-constitutionalists. I'll talk about that in a future show. But so Curtis Yarvin is not just and his solution to the Elizabeth Warren problem is monarchy, right? He's an advocate of monarchy. And, so you don't replace the executive every 8 years.
Well, he would say, no, you replace it. So the monarch has this benevolence. It's the same like a CEO. He uses often the example of a CEO.
Yes.
So the CEO, every few years, he goes to the board and says, this is what I've done. Have I been a good CEO or not? So something similar is what he envisions for the Caesar.
Yeah. Yep. Who the board is not clear, but who the board is not clear, and how these decisions are made. But yes, so this is a guy who's very influential. But connect this with kind of the conservative nationalists and the Christian nationalists who seem to have the positive goal of placing the nation, and in the Christian conservative perspective, placing religion as the primary, as the thing to drive towards. So they are trying to establish a positive, which is a positive in their mind, a negative in ours, which is the insignificance in the individual vis-a-vis family, community, and ultimately nation state.
And notice again how their worldview is so similar to the worldview of the left. The left says being concerned with your own affairs and wanting to have good things for yourself is bad. It's actually so bad that the epitome of these people, who are the rich businessmen, some will say deserve to die, or if they don't deserve to die, if they die, we're not going to shed many tears. Take this now to the right version of it. Being too concerned with yourself means that you don't put family and your lineage and your country and the Western civilization. You consider yourself more important than the future of this country. Who are you? Who do you think you are? You consider your personal happiness more important than the future of the collective. So they will dress it up as, we carry the best traditions of the Western values. No, they don't. Since when the Western tradition is that the most important thing is the collective? This has been the tradition that the Enlightenment fought against. Since when is the legacy of the West this idea that there is this omnipotent being who knows better, and we are and reason is something which is sinful? The whole point of the Enlightenment, the whole point of what we recognize and celebrate as the West, is to go against that.
But
So again, notice that
their whole point is the Enlightenment isn't the West, right? Their whole point is that the Enlightenment is anti-Western, and in that sense, they're real reactionaries.
they are reactionaries. And notice how everyone wants to go back, Yaron. Everyone wants to go back. There's no one who has a positive vision for the future. Maybe a few people like the tech bros, they have these nice things they put on Twitter with skyscrapers. They have no idea how we'll get there, but everyone else makes a video out wanting to go back. The left wants to go back to the time before quote unquote neoliberals, whatever is that. The environmentalists want to go back, I don't know, before maybe the agricultural revolution. The right-wing reactionaries, they want to go back either to the 50s, the white fences, and you come back and the lady with a flowery dress comes to hug you, or they want to go back before the Enlightenment, before modernity. Everyone wants to go back. No one has a vision, a forward-looking vision, that life can become better, that if we win the battle of ideas, sky is the limit. No one has this vision. And here's a great opportunity for us, by the way. We should also be way more optimistic, creating a nice vision, creating something that aspiring people will say, finally, someone has hope in humanity. Someone has actually aspiration for something great.
Yes, I think it is an opportunity. I think it's the appeal that Ayn Rand has to people, even, to this day, that when they read her, they get that sense of optimism, of achievement, of ability, which just doesn't exist in the culture. I mean, as you said, some of the tech guys are trying, like Mark Andreessen, but they're held back by a rotten philosophical view of the world, which is not consistent with this optimism that comes from them being entrepreneurs. So one of the things the Ayn Rand Institute is trying to do is, and this connects back to our CEO, is to be much more aggressive about defending CEOs, defending Western civilization, if you will, on some of these concrete issues. Maybe if you've got some examples of what the Institute is doing and maybe what the plan is moving forward.
Yeah, there's this new initiative, the Atlas Circle, which is unfolding these days. It's an initiative where you link the two strongest power in the culture, right? Intellectuals and business leaders. And it's trying to make business leaders understand and put words to the virtuous things that they're doing. So the Institute is trying to pass the message that, yes, you people, the leaders of business, you are good people. You are the benefactors of humanity. You are after profit, but that is something good. This is something which is perfectly, should be celebrated. This is something which you should feel zero shame. You should feel proud for the fact that you made a lot of money. And also that the system that allows your mind to operate freely and to produce and to create all these great things, that system is capitalism. A capitalism as it should be, a free market capitalism, and you should stand for the system. You should understand what the system would mean, and you should defend it. So giving intellectual ammunition to business leaders is something that the Institute is very, very big on these days. My colleague Robertas, he wrote this great open letter to Google. You also wrote an article, I think, with Robertas. And again, who else does this? Who goes to Google and tells them, you are doing something great. You are good. You are good. Don't apologize. Stand up for yourself. Stand up for what you're doing. No one does this. No one does this. We're doing this. We're proud in the Iran Institute that we're doing this. And of course, people can get involved, support us with various ways.
So what did we do with the Google open letter? What did the Institute do with it?
Well, the open letter came out last week, and I know Tal behind the scenes is trying to, I think, I'm not sure about that, but pass it to more and more business leaders. Ideally, it will reach also Google. And again, for a change,
it to like 20 executives at Google, if I'm not correct.
Well, you probably know. You probably know more about.
Well, I know what I read on Twitter. So I think we sent it to the CEO and to all the top executives at Google. We sent them this letter in support, given the attacks on them by antitrust, attacks
Yeah.
that don't seem to be going away with the Trump administration. That is, they will continue these attacks. And the idea is to take other issues like this and defend businessmen much more explicitly, and to try to establish a lot more personal relationships with these CEOs, with the business community, providing them intellectual ammunition. I think it started with a paper that Don and Ankar wrote on DEI, which was distributed among a series of executives.
I was involved with that also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Nikos was also involved in that.
Yeah, you can find some of these things. So if people go to Atlas Circle in Substack and check for open letter to Sundar Pichai and the Google team, or you know what, simple, go to the Ayn Rand Institute Substack, the New Ideal Substack, and you can see there the article, and you can see how you can also get involved. So the Ayn Rand Institute Substack, and there you will be able to find more information about how you can get involved. But at the moment, even if you just read this open letter, it's and pass it on. Again, you can find it in our Substack. Pass it on. There's also in video form with Tal narrating. And again, show it to your friends. Show it to people who are business owners, even if they have a small shop. The sentiment is the same. You are creating something, and you should feel proud. If you make money out of it, there's nothing to be ashamed. Again, you should feel proud. You're doing something good. You're a benefactor of humanity. Feel this pride. Feel this self-esteem. You're doing something good.
So also on the Substack is the CEO Lives Matter, which you co-authored. Is that right?
I co-authored it with Onkar. Yes, the CEO Lives Matter article.
So again, use that. It is a great way to. I don't know why this is doing that. It's a great way to get the word out there, and a great way to show people how our ideas apply to these specific concrete issues that are of this world, and very much relevant to what is going on in the world pretty much every day. You can, by the way, subscribe to the Ayn Rand to the Substack by going to new/ideal.aynrand.org, and that is the Ayn Rand Institute Substack.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Nikos. We don't have a lot of questions. I don't know where you guys all are. I think it was
so. Last time I was on the show,
Yeah.
there was a record in Super Chats for episodes where you have a guest, and I was hoping that today we would break this record.
No, not even close. Not even close, unfortunately. Not sure what happened. I think it's the time of day. I think if you were doing this at 2 a.m., we would get we would have got a much stronger response. But people are still, I don't know. I'm not sure why. 12 o'clock East Coast time is too early for people.
Well,
and you know, the Europeans, it's good for the Europeans, but they have no money.
Greeks definitely don't. Yes.
That's the case. So no, we've actually got very few questions, which is surprising because there's a lot of going on. Christopher says it's Super Bowl fatigue. Yesterday was the Super Bowl. I know it was a boring game. Why did anybody watch the second half? I mean, it was obviously going to be it was such a blowout. Not worth watching.
We can also receive NBA related questions, but not Super Bowl questions. I cannot answer Super Bowl questions. I can answer NBA questions.
Like what question would be an NBA question?
I don't know if the Luka Doncic.
Who's going to win the championship this year?
Well, Boston Celtics, #1 favorite, but yeah. I can give more details, but there has to be.
I'm happy to hear that.
There has to be a super chat. We don't do it for free.
All right. So Andy writes the defense of him. The defense of the CEO of United Healthcare also centered around the low profit margin in healthcare. It was like, God forbid, he offered the best in the world, and the price reflected that. He dropped to zero defenders, but the fact that he had such a low profit margin, he made so little money, was used to defend him.
It's like that. It's like that character in Atlas Shrugged, Eugene Lawson, who said, "I have the pride of saying I've never made any money." Like, if you hear something like that, your first reaction is, "What on earth are you talking about?" And this is practically the defense that the CEOs give, that, don't misunderstand us. We are not making that much money. Or others are saying, don't misunderstand us. We're actually losing money. This sounds more like you're begging for, I don't know for what. You're begging, like, please let us be, please trust us. We are actually losing here. Like, that makes no sense. Anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you see it constantly. And I always say, I celebrate when companies make money, and the more money, the more value they're creating. They're not forcing anybody to buy their product at the price that they're selling it at. So if they're making a huge profit margin, it means they're innovating. It means they're pushing ahead. They're doing something new and exciting.
And as opposed to what? Like, what would be, should we celebrate losses?
Well,
like,
no, there's a theory in economics, right? If you take an economics 101 class, which I don't know if you've ever taken, Nikos,
I cheated on almost all the economic classes.
Okay, well, good, because it would have been a waste of time if you had.
Yeah, it was just Keynesian crap. Yeah.
So one of the most important concepts in an Econ 101 class is perfect competition. And perfect competition is where all firms in an industry basically produce the same good, have no comparative advantage, they have no additional information. If they innovate, then everybody else innovates immediately. And that, in their view, is perfect. That is, if you have a platonic world with real competition, right? So anytime you have a company with large profit margins, that's a failure of markets, because it's a failure of the market to achieve perfect competition. Now, when you have everybody producing the same good, innovation is not a factor because everybody achieves it at the same time. Then what are the profit margins? They're basically zero or very close to zero, because they're competed away. So the ideal, the taught in economics, is zero profit margins. And large profit margins are market failure.
Translation: if someone is so good that he's better than me and you and someone else, that's something bad. So that's a
failure. Yes.
Yeah. So there's some egalitarianism lurking in the shadows over there.
Well, a lot of egalitarianism lurking in the shadows. And this is, again, every single economic 101 class is taught this. This is the ideal. The ideal is perfect competition. This is the platonic ideal. And the professor will say, look, yeah, we can't get there. But then that's the failure. The failure is, it's like the ideal is that nobody is self-interested. Like we all do everything out of a sense of altruism. We can't get there. We have to tolerate some self-interest. What can we do? Right? And this is, by the way, behind insider trading rules, or some of them. It's the egalitarianism. Everybody has the same information, same knowledge, same ability, same innovation, same everything. Right? It's why you want to get rid of the patent system. God forbid you could patent what you do, all of that.
Imagine if we had this in the NBA, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you score, I mean, we kind of have it with the salary cap, but that's an agreement among the deals so that the league is more interesting. But imagine if we actually had it in the game that you're not allowed to get 15 points ahead.
Yep.
Because you are too good.
Yep.
So we are penalizing, the better you are, the more we're penalizing you. Like, it makes zero sense. Why does it make sense in other areas in life then?
Well, I mean, the egalitarians would say sports is evil. Sports is wrong, right? They would say that because it has winners and losers. And they do that in kids sports in America and some places. There are no winners, no losers. Everybody gets a trophy. Everybody gets a medal. We don't count the goals. You play football, your football. We play football. Don't count the goals. We don't count the baskets in basketball. We don't count. We don't want to keep score.
I'm so glad we didn't have this in school. We took basketball so seriously. I think the only time I cried in school was when we lost a basketball game in elementary school. We took it very seriously, and I think it did us tremendous good as a life
Absolutely.
lesson.
Absolutely. All right. So, by complaining, because I'm good at that, I'm Jewish, you're Greek, we're good at complaining. People have woken up a little bit, and so the W.R. Brown has come in with $200, so definitely made a statement here, and he says, I believe people naturally develop a philosophy, but because their philosophies don't emphasize reason, they're contradictory in nature. They regress to conformity of social accepted rationalizations determined by whatever psychological types they are successful in that environment. Thoughts?
Well, I think actually achieving a good philosophy is not a default. It's a rare exception, and it's something that if you did it, you should feel so proud for yourself. Because there's so much bad ideas out there. You're bombarded everywhere for determinism. I couldn't help it. There is no such thing as free will. Who knows if there is one reality? Every truth is a half truth. If you manage to get through all this, A, you're an exception. B, it's very difficult. C, it's by no means a default. By no means everyone is somehow inclined to come up with a good philosophy. Particularly in a culture like this today, it's something which is a rare exception. If I understood well, though, was the question that whether this is something which everyone.
Well, his view is that people develop a philosophy one way or the other. They absorb a philosophy.
Oh yeah.
And that the consequence, because it's not grounded in reason, the consequence of that is that it's full of contradictions, and they can't defend it, even in their own mind. They can't really defend it because they've just absorbed it unconsciously in some ways. And then, so that means that ultimately they're just going to regress to some form of conformity, which he would say suits their psychological profile or whatever. I don't know about the psychological stuff. I'm not a psychologist, but certainly conformism to what's going on around is definitely a part of that. And you can see in a sense that we talked about the right and we talk about the left and we talk about the center, and fundamentally they're all the same. And when it comes down to real issues, rubber hit the road, they're all the same because they're all collectivists and they're all altruists, because that's what they all conform to. They give it their own spin based on maybe psychology, maybe emotion, maybe I don't know. But so yeah, I think he's right. Did you have something to add to that?
No, and conformity quite often is intellectual conformity. So quite often I post stuff on Twitter about Marx. I study Marx, and when I come up with something, I share it with Twitter. And every single time, the Marxists, their reply is either appeal to authority, oh, but that ex-Marxist theory said you are wrong, or hiding behind jargon. I'm going to use these very complicated terms, which actually mean nothing. And I was thinking about it, and I thought, this is their comfort blanket. This is them trying to feel that, yes, I belong to this group, and I'm going to use the only weapons this group gives me, which is appeal to authority and jargon. It's so difficult to ask yourself, wait a minute, what do these empty words mean? Oh, they don't mean anything, therefore I might be wrong. This is something difficult. So again, anyone who achieves that, you're an exception. You are an elite, an intellectual elite.
So he's clarifying. He says, my question emphasizes you develop a philosophy. However, if it's not rational, it will be confusing and contradictory. And therefore, you will ultimately conform to, and it puts in quotation marks, psychological personality type. And I don't know about you, Nikos, but I'm not sure I know what psychological personality type is.
I don't know either. But
Sounds
from
right.
what he's describing, I get elements that remind me of a group that I know very well from inside and the outside, which is Marxist. This sounds what they're doing. They create this bubble, they inhabit this bubble, and when anyone goes to poke this bubble, it's an existential threat to them, because then it's like, oh, if this bubble is destroyed, I'm floating in the air. Where do I belong?
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying, W.R. Brown, I guess, is, I mean, makes sense to me that something drives some people to conform towards Marxism, others towards conform to the right, others towards conform to just cynicism, skepticism, and kind of a nothingness, which is also a kind of philosophy. And it's probably driven by psychology because where they get comfort from, what serves as their security blanket. So it probably conforms to certain psychological personality types. But I don't know enough about the psychological element here to really see the one-to-one relationship. Like Marxists, it's this type of psychology, and these other people are another type of psychology.
For what it's worth, I wouldn't be surprised if there are people like that in the freedom movement, in the objectivist movement. No one is insulating you from the responsibility to think and for the possible consequences of not thinking.
Some people conform into objectivism.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. Yeah.
I've met many of them. They don't last very long, but for a while they conform into objectivism. All right, Silvanos, $50. Thank you, Silvanos. One thing to be aware of also with the CO situation is it functions as a chilling effect for aspiring people and entrepreneurs. Thanks for covering the subject. It says, given this attitude, some people are not going to go into that area because of how the culture treats them.
Yeah, not even in terms of they're going to be afraid of their life, but it's not an area where you think you will acquire some self-esteem. It's an area where people will be torn that, okay, I think I'm doing something great, but everyone is telling me I'm not doing something great. Therefore, what am I doing here? And even giants, I'm going to use a fictional example, even like Hank Rearden experiences something like that. And he's a giant, again, in the fiction, but he's a giant. And yet, he himself doesn't feel the self-esteem that I'm doing something good. Of course, when someone tells him this, something wakes up inside. He's like, yes, of course. How didn't I realize?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. So it's the more guilt we place on CEOs, the more guilt we place on entrepreneurs, the more we blame them and accuse them and kill them in some cases, the more difficult it is to be a CEO, and less motivating it is to become one. Right. So if you're a young person thinking, should I go become an entrepreneur? And it's like, yeah, but they're greedy and selfish and they're not good people and so on. For some people at the margin, it disincentivizes them.
Imagine a culture that treats them the way we treat basketball stars.
Yeah.
I grew up with basketball stars in my in posters, and this was something good because I was looking up to some excellence. But imagine if this excellence was also like, I'm gonna be the best CEO in medical. I'm gonna revolutionize the medical profession. That would be great for the person. It would be so great for the rest of us. Imagine how better off we'd all be, how longer we would live. Healthy, good lifespans if more people were motivated to go to healthcare. Imagine if we have 10 Elon Musks, I mean the good Elon, not the cultural persona, in cancer research or in other chronic diseases research.
There was a period, you were too young, I think, but there was a period in the 90s and maybe early 2000s, maybe the late 80s, where there was a bit of that. The nerds in high school admired Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and they probably had posters of them up on their wall, right? Like you did, of basketball stars. And there was a period where going to Silicon Valley was like the coolest thing in the world, And there's a little bit of that still remains with regard to tech, not with anything else. Yeah. But the moment has passed. There's a much more negative and cynical and negative attitude today than there was back then. So there was something about the 90s, I think, coming out of, well, I think a lot of it's Ayn Rand, but and the prevalence of Ayn Rand in the 70s and 80s that resulted in a lot of people admiring CEOs and successful CEOs.
Early 90s was peak civilization, like the Michael Jordan Chicago Bulls, the style, the aesthetics.
Well, the fall of the Soviet Union, right? The fall of the Berlin. Yeah. I mean, that peak civilization in many ways. That is, I don't know about style and aesthetics. I'm gonna leave that to your domain. Certainly not mine. I have no idea what that is.
I will just say one name: Pat Riley. This says it all when it comes to peak aesthetics.
Yeah,
You
this
don't
is
need
why
anything.
this is why you get along with Jonathan. I hated Pat Riley. That slick hair back, that suits, stuffy suit on a basketball court. I mean, that was the devil's attire in basketball. It was, it was the Lakers and the devil and Hollywood and everything the opposite of what a good basketball means, which is like the down to earth, hard work of a Larry Bird and the Celtics in the 1980s.
I was there on your first episode. I followed all these years. I think, without an exaggeration, I've never been so disappointed when you telling me you don't appreciate Pat Riley.
I really, I mean, I really dislike the whole look. I really dislike the look.
Anyway,
I just crushed Nikos. He's I don't know if he'll recover from this one. All right, Andrew. A CEO who feels proud because he's benefiting mankind is better than one who feels guilty, but better still is the CEO is proud because he's created what he wants for his own sake. For his pride to sustain, doesn't he need explicit selfishness?
well, first of all, think how difficult it is to create something new. First of all, it requires independence. Odds are when you create something new, it looks unattainable. It looks as something difficult. It looks as many people will be against you. So you need this independent vision. There is an interview by Bill Gates in the early 90s. He's in a talk show and he tries to explain the internet. And the audience is laughing at him. And it's imagine having the perseverance, the strength to say implicitly, you're all wrong. All you who are laughing at me, you're wrong and I'm right.
Yep.
And actually, I don't just think I'm right. I'm going to bet a lot of money, my money, that I'm right and you are wrong. Imagine the strength of character it has. So yes, I think our friend is into something when it says, at some point, it also requires this selfishness to say, I have a vision, it is the right vision, and I'm going to pursue it.
Well, and he's saying that to sustain it, at some point you need to become explicit about that selfishness. You need to be willing to defend your own selfishness, which none of them can without Ayn Rand. Some of them flirt with it. I think Steve Jobs flirted with it. I think Bill Gates on occasion flirted with it. But it's very hard without an explicit, worked out philosophy, at least at the philosophy at the Reardon level. All right, Richard asks, as a Greek, how can we make philosophy great again?
Well, I'll just give you one answer on the as a Greek part. I don't think there's any culture in the Western world so bad as the Greek. So the Greece has still a communist party which is loyal to the Soviet Union, although Soviet Union doesn't exist. The Greece has a religious right which hates the West with the same fervor as the leftist hates the West. So I'm the least, a Greek is the least qualified person in the world to give you advice on philosophy. So I will have to skip this question. I wish I had a good answer, but Yaron might have a better answer going back to ancient Greece.
I mean, I think the next question should be, so Nikos, why are you in Greece? He just said it's the worst culture in the Western world.
For weird tribal reasons.
For weird tribal reasons. All right. We'll work on it. I mean, how do you make philosophy great again? It's what we're doing at the Ayn Rand Institute. I mean, there's nothing else that can be done. That is, Ayn Rand made philosophy great again. She's already done it. Now it's a question of making the world realize it, getting the world to acknowledge that fact. And the only way to do it is through the work of the intellectuals at the Ayn Rand Institute, bringing that philosophy to the forefront, using it and showing how to use it to solve the issues and the problems that all of us face in the world today.
But also I think I came up with some answer. Imagine, let's say you're someone who never works out, and then suddenly you become very motivated and you wake up early every day and you work out, and someone asks you, how did you go through this change? And you give them, let's say, oh, I read David Goggins and now I'm inspired. This is how you can inspire someone to read, let's say, a particular book. Similarly with philosophy, if you have a good life, a good life in terms of how you carry yourself, in terms of how you interact with the world, in terms of how you view your life, if you live philosophy, this is perhaps the best advocacy of philosophy. Rather than saying, oh, this is a good philosophy, being a vehicle of this philosophy is a good start. I don't know if it's the best thing, but it's a good start.
Mary Aline says, thanks for all you do, Nikos.
Many thanks, Marilyn, from the old days in ARC UK, from the very early days. I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Do you think we're heading for a world like Anthem or what?
No, I don't think we are heading for a world like Anthem. I'm more positive than most people. I think 2024 was the best year, one of the best years for humanity since '89. If you see it from a zoom out perspective, how many bad people were defeated, how many good things happen. So no, we're not headed towards the world. If you tell me you have to bet money, and there's one path, is we live till 200 years, private spaceships. The other is the world of Athens. I would bet more money the path towards we live till 200 and their private spacecrafts.
All right. Thanks, Marilyn. David Dean, $100. You're getting there, Nikos. You're getting there. It's this amazing show. Thank you, Dave. All right. I don't remember what the record is. Do you remember what it was that day?
No, because you didn't reveal it, but you said the record was broken.
Okay. I'll look back, but I don't think we're at the record, but we're doing very well. Much better, like 5 times better, literally, than we were just a little while ago. All right. Silvano says, hey, I love this time. Okay. Somebody loves this time. I remember Silvanos used to love it when I did early shows and then 2 shows a day where I did one in the early and one in the evening. All right. Enoch KR. Do you think President Trump would like to completely emulate President Xi Jinping governing style? With UK royalty flavor, or is it a complete distortion of his aspirations?
Well, when it comes to emulating styles, there's no question that Trump wants to emulate the style of a strongman.
Yep.
And I don't think this is even controversial. Does he have the ideological vision of he wants to be like China? No, I don't think so. Because Trump has no ideological vision. He has a personal taste vision, a vibes vision, but he hasn't got an ideological vision, which means whether the boat is going to go one direction or the other direction is who whispers what to his ear at what time of the day. I think even if you ask Trump, do you have this vision? I don't think he has an answer.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, Sir Brixton Cole, he says, political extremists on both sides take turns pretending to be counterculture.
Well, many people predicted that the woke phenomenon would bring a reaction. I expected this reaction. I expected it would be on the fringe. I didn't expect it would become institutional so fast.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about the fact that this kid who's put up racist Twitter posts is now enthusiastically being rehired by people like JD Vance and Elon Musk and everybody else. It's a cool, we're not going to judge you if you're a racist.
So here's the contrarianism, right? The contrarian says the left deplatform people for no reason. Therefore, we are not going to deplatform you, irrespective of reason.
Yep.
Whatever you do, we're not. So you see, they cannot think in principles. They cannot think that the problem with the left was that there was on a witch hunt, they were persecuting perfectly legitimate opinions or they were completely exaggerating the moral culpability of people. That was the main problem. The problem was not that if I have a private platform and if you're a complete degenerate, I have the right to tell you, get off my platform. It's so impossible to them to think in first principles.
Yep. And of course, the actual result of this is to legitimize more racists, whether they
Well,
intend that or not. Whether they intend it or not, that's
yeah.
the consequence. It emboldens.
Just spend some time on Twitter on the For You timeline, and you will see that Yaron is right on this.
All right. Oyvind says Nikos is great. Thank you, Oyvind.
Many thanks.
Robert Nacia says, "Yep, time of day it is. I just joined, missed most of the show live. We'll go back and listen after the wrap up." Sounds good, Robert. Thank you.
Hi, Robert.
Colt says, "Who's your favorite to make the NBA Finals?"
Look, on the West, it has to be the team that has Jokic. He's the best player in the league, so most people don't put much trust on Denver. I think Jokic will be in the final. On the East, there's no question it's going to be the Boston Celtics. We're going to have the final that we should have last year, Boston versus Denver. I support the Lakers. I'm a Doncic fanboy. I'm a LeBron fanboy. I don't see the Lakers making it that far in the playoffs without a big. Who's gonna guard Jokic if they play with Denver?
Yeah, I mean, Nikos is a Laker fan. What else is there to say? I mean,
No. I go with I don't go with tribal affiliation. I go with where are the players or the coaches that I like.
Yep. All right, Adam asks, have you seen the original Korean version of Startup? The main theme is primacy of consciousness versus primacy of existence, but the role of the CEO is an important sub-theme. Please comment.
I haven't even watched the American version, my friend, so sorry, I have no comment.
So I'm watching Startup right now. So I'll let you know, Adam, when I finish it. I think I'm in episode 3. I will say this, that aesthetically comparing it to Mr. Sunshine, you got to be kidding me. I mean, it's just not in the same ballpark. The way it's shot, the way it's done, the dramatic elements. I mean, it might have a great theme, but it's just not that engaging so far. It's fun. I like the Korean dramas, but Nikos is skeptical.
No, I'm not. I was thinking that everyone in the Objectivist universe were talking about Mr. Sunshine. I watched, I think, 10 minutes, and then I gave up.
Yeah.
Maybe I should reconsider.
Everybody is, I discovered it a few years ago when it first came out on Netflix, and have been promoting it aggressively since. It's probably my favorite TV show ever, or close. It's certainly in the top 5 of my favorite TV shows of all time. And it's very non-21st century. It's very harkens back to a romantic age. It's, I think, Hugo-esque in its setup and in the drama that it's creating. But I can see people today not liking it because it's a different pace. Yeah. It's a different aesthetic quality. But it's one of these shows where you could freeze frame almost every shot. Certainly once you get into later, and it's like a painting. It's like a beautiful image. But yeah, you've got to get to episode 3. The problem is that there are a number of problems with it. One is it's in Korean. And the actors are mostly Korean, so they all look the same. It's a cliche, but people who look very different than you usually all look the same. It's hard to differentiate, at least for me. So you don't know who the characters are. And then in the first episode in particular, lots of flashbacks, which they don't warn you of. So you're not sure what timeline you're in it's all the setup. So very hard to follow the first 2 episodes. You have to get through the first 2 episodes, and then it gets really, really, really good.
That's what Marxists also say about Das Kapital. You have to go through the first part.
Well, but that's also true of what do you call it?
Human action.
Human action. Yeah.
By the way, I remember what was the first movie recommendation I got from the Yaron Brook show. It was a film called The Most Violent Year, which was not a well-known film. It was a very nice film. So since then, I'm keeping notes of what recommendation Yaron gives, and I tend to follow them.
And that it's a positive portrayal of a CEO, of a businessman, not
Yeah.
a CEO but a positive portrayal of a business guy who's trying to make a living, trying to make money.
Yep.
All right, Bree says, what if the company's revenue is dependent on government funding, from weapon companies to charitable NGOs? Is the CEO helping humanity or just a leech?
Well, first of all, money is not something that weapons is not something that a good government should use and make you feel elites. It's something that relates to the national defense, which is one of the very few legitimate things that the government should do. So that particular example, I haven't thought of it, to be honest. So instead of giving you a half-baked answer, I would just say I don't think particularly that the defense industry, and again, I come from a country which is Greece, which having good weapon system is very, very important because we face threats from the neighbor towards the east. So no, I see a company that creates good weapon systems as something that help us sleep with more peace of mind every night.
I think you should be careful judging the productivity of a company based on where the money's coming from. The reality is, for example, that over 50% of all healthcare dollars are spent by the government. Does that make all those doctors and all those pharmaceutical companies and all those medical device and hospital companies, do they make them leeches? No. I mean, the reality is that we live in a world in which 50% of all the money on healthcare is paid by the government, and you do the best that you can within that world. It's a restraint on them. It's not a positive. Now, there's certainly all leeches. There are Aaron Boyles in probably every industry, and there are lots of Aaron Boyles in the world today. But it's important to differentiate who's Aaron Boyle and who's not an Aaron Boyle, who's a leech and who's not a leech. The very fact that Elon Musk gets, SpaceX, which I don't think is a leechy company, gets almost all its revenue from the government. So is he a leech? I don't think with SpaceX he's creating real value. There's a real long-term vision there. And it just happens that because of NASA, government is the number one spender on satellites and things like that. So you have to dig a lot deeper. And NGOs, I'm suspect of all NGOs, but again, you have to look more deeply and figure out, okay, what are they actually doing? Are they providing value to the people of North Korea to fight for their freedom against the brutal dictator? And they get some money from the government? Is that going to wipe them out? Does that mean they're completely hopeless because they got some money from the government? Or is what they're doing how you measure the value that they're actually creating or adding? Neo says, we are harsh to culture for having bad ideas. Okay, we're harsh about the culture for having bad ideas, but entrepreneurs suck up to government just as much and don't fight for freedom, capitalism. Why not be just as harsh to business people for not fighting?
For the first and foremost, because they've already done something which is brilliant. They have already created a lot of value, and they have already made my life and the life of those I love and of everyone much, much, much better. So again, as a decent human being, the first thing you do is you say thank you. If someone has benefited you, first you start by this. You start by saying, hey, I recognize that you've done something for me. And again, the main question is who put them in this impossible condition? And we have to be very clear with that. You have to explain to people, look, the fact that they have to go and plead to the government, the number one responsibility for this lies with the government. Should the CEOs be braver? Yes. Should Zuckerberg, wherever he's invited to the Senate, should he give a speech like Reardon in court? I would say yes, but I don't know what would be the consequences if he doesn't put on that show. And I don't know. If I would do a better job than Zuckerberg, I would be running Meta, and Zuckerberg would be somewhere else. So
Yeah, I think you have to recognize that, as Nico said, the value that they create for you, and that is the more fundamental. The reality is politics is downstream from culture and downstream from your life, and your life is better for their existence. Recognize that, appreciate that, and then you want to blame them for their political stand, fine, but that's a secondary issue. The primary is they made my life better. No matter what's his name, CEO of Apple says about Geo, Mother Earth, I got one of these. Thank you, Apple. Thank you, Tim Scott. I mean, this is amazing, right? So that is the primary, and then I can condemn him for his politics and everything else. But first, recognize the genius that makes your life better, that makes your life possible. There is no life in the 21st century. There is no life in the 21st century without business. And I don't care where you live on planet Earth. Every single human being on planet Earth today's life is better because primarily of American businesses, a few European businesses, maybe some Chinese businesses and Japanese businesses, but it's very few places in the world that make life possible on Earth today. And not to realize that and not to recognize that and not to say thank you for that fact, that is the overwhelming thing. The politics, that is secondary, always secondary. Megan asks the serious question of, what do you think is more important, the moon landing or communism?
what is more important to whom? What is more important? So the moon landing is, again, many people, particularly libertarians, they're cynical. Oh, it was a business, it was a government endeavor.
It's all a hoax anyway. There was no moon landing.
I used to believe this as a communist, that it was a hoax. But why did I believe this as a communist? Because it hurt me so much to see the free world achieve something big. And let me take it a step further. Because I was a misanthrope, I hated that humanity achieved this. So this tells you all you need to know about why the moon landing was brilliant, because it was such a moment for humanity. You see this, and then you say everything is possible. Since we did this, why not do everything? Why do we consider everything which is physically feasible? We should consider it that it's something that should be a matter of time. Maybe our friend mean, is the moon landing more important or the fall of communism? Well, they're both very important.
Yeah.
I always want to start with the positive. I mean, they're both positive, so yeah, whatever.
All right. Inako says, do you think loose-fitting clothes are more popular because it's easier to manufacture en masse and offshore rather than bespoke?
No, because there were mass-manufactured slim-fit clothes some years ago. Now, when it comes to loose fit, there are two types of loose fit. The one is the Cary Grant loose fit suit, which there are these guys on Twitter who are for traditional lines and they like it. I am for this loose fit, and there are these loose baggy hoodies and stuff, which I'm not in favor. And there's a very ideological reason. Because it passes the message, I don't take myself too seriously, and I don't like that. I like the idea of standards. I like the idea of I care about my life in every single aspect of it, including being presentable, not only to other people, also to yourself. This baggy stuff that whether you have a nice figure or your figure is whatever, it's like egalitarianism in clothes. Like everything goes, every body type goes, every style goes. I don't like this egalitarianism.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that because I hate loose, baggy clothes too. But there's a disagreement there somewhere that we can get to on another occasion.
How about we agree on that? What matters is the intentionality.
Yes.
If you're intentional, even if you prefer a loser, like who can tell me that that Cary Grant is not stylish and is not intentional. So what matters is the intention.
Yeah, my intention is comfort. I like to be comfortable.
This is such a wasted opportunity, by the way, because I've seen you in official occasions where most people haven't seen you, where you wear all black and you look like Diego Simeone, and this is such a badass look.
You stole my black look. Look, you're wearing it now.
First of all,
I thought it
I
was
didn't
my look.
steal it because I've been advocating for it before I saw you in the gala. But people, if we could persuade Yaron to adopt the Diego Simeone look, objectivists would gain at least 4% higher cultural impact just from that change.
So this is black shirt, black.
Black on black or very dark blue on dark blue, like the Batman look.
Yep. All right. I did buy because of this, I did buy about a month ago, I bought a black button-down shirt. So I'm, you're influencing me slowly. But if I had my choice, shorts and a t-shirt and sandals. Flip-flops, even better. No, I don't wear flip-flops, but sandals. Which is what I'm wearing right now. So not t-shirt, but everything else. I'm barefoot. This is the way to go. Instead of those fancy shoes you wear to emulate barefootness, I would just go barefoot.
The original barefoot.
Yeah, I'm the original barefoot. Michael says, I disagree a bit. He's disagreeing with me, not you, Nikos, with your answer that people who want power over others are not weak. Why do they have this intense desire to control or subjugate others? Because they are insecure. And that level of inferiority complex is a real weakness. I guess it depends how you understand weak. So, yes, do they have low self-esteem? Absolutely. So people who want control of other people have low self-esteem, in my view. Is low self-esteem always weak? Is always manifest itself in weakness? I don't know what you mean exactly by weak. What do we mean by weak? Weak in what dimension? Maybe Nikos has something to say about this.
No, I'm just to return to the first topic. What is the mindset of Luigi? What his or whoever did this again? The justice has. What is the mindset of the murderer of a CEO? It is the mindset of I'm a lowlife. I will never succeed what this guy has done. I'm never capable to create what this guy has created, but I can do one thing. I can destroy him.
Yep.
And therefore I can get the kick that I have some power over you. I can't do what you did, but I can destroy you. And this is the mindset. This is what Ayn Rand described as envy. Now, does envy come hand in hand with something like weakness? At some point, yes. Weakness or inability. I cannot do what you do. In a way, I'm weaker than you. And the only way I can have power over you is the power of distraction. So maybe there is some connection there.
I think that's all right. And I think we all basically agree. I just don't like the term weakness in this context. And I think it would be misunderstood. They lack self-esteem. They have an inferiority complex. I agree completely. And they're impotent in a real sense. They're impotent. And therefore, so it comes out in as really they're impotent at being human, which means they're impotent at reason. They're impotent at production. And therefore, it manifests as strength as an animal. What does that mean? That means physical force. The animalistic is the physical. And anybody who resorts to physical force is basically reverting to being an animal and denying their humanity, the fact that they're human. All right, Michael, also, what makes people want to hold on to their irrationality?
Inertia, that it's the default, it's the easy option, it's the option that doesn't require much of you. It doesn't require much of you, so it's comfortable in the short term, or it looks like comfortable because you don't know how else to operate, perhaps. What do you think?
And I don't think they hold it as I want to hold on to my irrationality, because they rationalize their irrationality. So they frame their irrationality in rational terms, and they try to convince themselves they're being rational. They at some level understand irrationality is required. So it's emotion. I agree completely. It's inertia. It's comfortable fear. They're afraid to go out of what they've always done. They're afraid that if they think everything will fall apart, right? Their life will fall apart because they'll have to rethink everything. So it's definitely at the end of the day, it's emotions.
I knew a Marxist professor who actually went to China and volunteered during the time of the Cultural Revolution. Imagine if this guy in his 80s starts thinking everything over. What were the ideas I supported? What were the regimes I supported? I think with this guy would, if he did that, he would have a breakdown like James Taggart has at the end of Atlas Shrugged. So, yeah, it's not easy.
Richard says, thoughts on Wembanyama and the future of the Spurs.
I think Wembanyama will change the way we understand the game. Not so much in offense, more in defense. He's going to be the most scary defender the sports had seen. Yeah, there's no question the Spurs is going to be one of the best teams in the next few years. I don't know if it's going to be under Popovich, but all these years with Popovich, perhaps one of the three best managers in history, has created the culture. So it's the best environment for someone like Wembanyama, who, for people who don't know, he's someone like an alien. He's someone who he's 2 meters 20. I don't know how, this is more than 7 feet. But he can control the ball. He can shoot threes. He's from France, so he's scary as in offense, but in defense he's beyond scary. He's gonna be the biggest defensive riddle for their opponent. So the Spurs, not this year, I'm not sure how he's gonna fit with that trade they got soon, but from 2026, they're probably going to be legitimate contenders if they build properly around him, and if Pop is the next day after Pop is up to the standards that Popovich has set. Yep. I'm a big fan of the 2011-2014 Spurs. I think they played one of the best basketballs we've ever seen. Team basket, team effort, basketball at its best.
So we disagree about Riley, but we agree about Popovich. That's good.
He's a leftist, but what can we do?
What can you do?
Also, very good example, how someone in their professional area, they can have reason and objectivity and everything that we admire. And in a different area of their life, these principles are not transformed to a proper view, a rational view of the world.
Yep. All right, you're going to be disappointed in Mary Eileen because she says, thanks for the Pat Riley laugh. I don't like him either, she says. Michael says, why is the objectivist movement forming around Austin, Texas? Why not Dallas or South Florida?
I have zero idea. I haven't been to any of these places ever. So
I mean, if you go to Dallas, South Florida, and Austin, Texas, it becomes very clear why. I mean, Austin is a vibrant, interesting. It's a beautiful place. It's got hills. It's got water. Dallas is flat and boring and very Texasy. Austin has culture and a university and tech. Tech started in Austin before the objectivist moved there. So tech's been around there since the 1980s. Austin's just a vibrant place. In Florida, you know, South Florida is where people retire to. It's not vibrant. It's not exciting. It doesn't have the same kind of, plus it's flat. And you know, it's just not as nice. Austin's a really, really nice place.
My experience with Florida was Ocon 2023 in Miami, which I like the idea because I like the Miami Heat a lot. I still remember the first feeling of exiting the hotel during the day and my sunglasses fogging. I'm from Greece. I've never experienced such an inhospitable summer weather. The humidity was something that I've never ever experienced in my life in Greece, where we have frequent heat waves, but I've never experienced like something like that I experienced in Miami.
Yeah, you gotta do Houston or New Orleans sometime in the summer.
It's worse.
It's worse than Miami. Yeah, it is. Dave says, does comedy psychologically align with one's personal aesthetic appeal?
I remember Peikoff criticizing, I think the film was The Dumb and the Dumber, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no idea why, but I always, with this type of comedy, it felt something which I didn't like. I could not put it into words. So I cannot give you a lecture on why some comedy I like and some comedy I don't like. But I can tell you there's some comedy that on a sense of life level, I always found it very, very appalling, very, very disgusting. So I don't have the philosophical answer, but there's something there. Maybe Yaron has a better answer.
Yeah, Dumb and Dumber is a good example. I think most American comedies are they're dumb, and they celebrate dumbness. It's as if they're putting on a pedestal dumbness. You're not laughing at dumbness. You're actually celebrating dumbness. You're laughing at anything smart that happens there, and so it's definitely a reflection of a particular philosophical sense of life view. And in that sense, yeah, it's part of one's personal aesthetic appeal, part of one's personal aesthetic views. I think you can tell something about somebody based on what kind of humor they like. But it's also what you grew up on. And like all things sense of life, a lot of things impact it. A lot of things impact it. So it's not philosophy equals certain types of humor. It's philosophy filtered through a whole lifetime of experiences, conclusions, and ultimately a sense of life, which is something we don't really have much control over directly. So it's definitely aligns with something. I think it aligns with a sense of life more than anything else.
But to say something to go against many objectivists and their taste on films, I really liked and I consider it a masterpiece, Forrest Gump. I remember some I think it was also Peikoff who said that it celebrates the idea of if you are stupid, you achieve things, but see it from a different perspective. It's such a nice narration of the cultural history of the US. And also Forrest Gump, he's such a valuer if you think about it. He goes after things, he's loyal to his values, and it's quite optimistic. If he didn't have this horrible person who was that girlfriend, that film would be better. But
life is like a box of chocolates.
I never got that line, but it's not the reason why I like. First of all,
it's random. There's no cause. There's no driver, and there's a sense in which Forrest Gump is a value of it. There's also a sense in which everything that happens to him happens by accident.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a problematic film. It's not. It's. I get
great music, great acting.
Look, it's a different evaluation. There are two different evaluations you have to make to every movie. Is it aesthetically good? Is well integrated? Theme? Is the music good? Is it well? Yeah. Is it directed well? All of that, and I think it is. I think all of that. It's good. And then is the theme a good theme? And I think the theme is probably not a good theme if we really dug into it. But leave that for another time. I'd have to see the movie more recently too to remember. All right, last question. I think. Okay. So he's saying low self-esteem is certainly that one is low. I'm not trying to understand what that means. Versus anxiety being lack of certainty. Am I good? Anxiety versus I am bad equals low self-esteem. Sorry for the abridged formulation, character limit, thoughts.
I'll answer with a Kobe Bryant quote.
Okay.
He said something like that whenever he felt stressed, he knew that he hadn't prepared well. And there's this other story that someone visits Floyd Mayweather in his in his room before a game, and the guy's very, very stressed. He's like, he wants to say to Floyd, "Look, good, I'm gonna leave you. I'm sure you're very stressed." And Floyd tells him, "Dude, relax. I'm not stressed. I've done everything that I could do. There's nothing that I can do now, 20 minutes before the game, that's gonna make it better or worse." Where am I going with all this parable? That there is some correlation of who I am, what I've done, how prepared I am for life or for a particular endeavor, and your level of anxiety. I'm not using anxiety here on a psychological term. I'm not a psychologist. But the idea that if you know that I'm fit for life, I'm fit for the purpose, then you are not stressed. When I've rehearsed one of my talks very well, and by the way, why do I rehearse well? I've been taught by Yaron in the Ayn Rand University, and make sure to follow his public speaking classes. Then I feel almost zero stress. My heart rate is at normal. Where I'm not prepared, my heart rate goes up. This also applies, I think, to all areas of life.
I think that's all. I think that's right. I think low self-esteem is not certainty that one is low. I don't think people think in terms of that. People just have low self-esteem because they don't esteem themselves, because they don't take pride in what they do, because they don't, acknowledge where they're good and where they're not, because they might have a rotten character and they deserve the low self-esteem. There are lots of reasons why they have low self-esteem, but it's not that they have certainty about anything. It doesn't reach the level of, yeah, I'm shitty. I'm a horrible human being. That's why they don't think. I mean, you guys think that people sit down and say, oh yeah, I've got low self-esteem because I think I'm low. No, it doesn't work that way. They just have low self-esteem because of the actions that they take and the things that they do in life. Anxiety is, yeah, there's such a sense, it's a lack of certainty, a lack of preparation. It's an emotional response to uncertainty, to a certain level of uncertainty. And then, what is it? I am bad equals low self-esteem. Yeah, but again, I am bad is not something people hold. Very few people hold I am bad. They just, it's there. It's an implicit premise in much of what they do, but it's very hard for people to actually think I'm a bad person.
At some level, though, they do.
Yes.
So my example is Stalin. By the way, people, I had the idea, I told Yaron we should do an episode on Stalin. So in the future, send him super chats and say, bring Nikos to do a 5-hour episode, all things related to communism or Stalin. Anyway.
Oh, then it'd be good.
It's very interesting if people read the biographies of Stalin, how neurotic he was, how much anxiety, again, not in psychological terms, he has. He's a guy who couldn't sleep. He's a guy who was paranoid all the time. Why? Because he knew what he had done. He knew what type of person he was. He knew what type of life he had left, and his life sucks. His life sucked. His was a horrible life. His wife, the person he loved more, committed suicide because of how much she hated him at some point. Imagine having this in your consciousness. So Stalin, for me, is the number one example why being a horrible person leads to a horrible life. And at the very, very depth of your mind and your soul, you know it. You know it.
I think that's right. All right, this has been great, Nikos, and I mean it's a big number. So I don't think it's the record, but it's one of the better showings. I don't know how
Let's put it this way: it's a record for an episode at this time of the day. Everyone is a winner. I get a participation trophy for
there you go.
For this.
And the reality is that I don't know how you pulled it up because it looked bleak, very, very bleak. It was like you were going into the fourth quarter, down 30 points, and you still make it up, and you win the game. So, good for you, and thank you to all the super chatters. And I missed a bunch of stickers. I know Wes did a $50 sticker, and there were a lot of other stickers. So I appreciate all of you guys. And then we have to thank our $200 guy, the W.R. Brown 19. Thank you for the $200, and thanks to everybody. This is great. Thanks, Nikos. The rest of you, I will probably see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Yaron. Thanks, everyone.